The process by which cryptocurrency is created has historically been called mining. Mining usually refers to the process of unearthing metals and minerals from the ground, which is, of course, itself integral to computing. The base materials of computers, before advanced manufacturing and assembly into software, includes many minerals, ores, and metals. The metaphor is not an accident. It reflects the algorithmic search for something rare and valuable, which is the core act of proof-of-work mining. The thing being searched for is a random number, but not just any random number. It is the specific random number that answers a cryptographic riddle. Looking for it is like looking for the last jigsaw puzzle piece in the dark. Without seeing its shape, there is no faster way to find the right one than to go through the infinite search space of all possible puzzle pieces and to try them one by one. While proof of work is only one of a few widely used cryptocurrency mining algorithms, its outsized resource consumption and long-time dominance grants the metaphor a similarly outsized relevance. But compared to the machine mass of the internet as a whole, cryptocurrency is only the proverbial iceberg tip. And what is true of cryptocurrency mining is also broadly true of all computing infrastructure. It consists of material and has a physical presence in the world. It has energy and resource needs and associated climate impacts. It requires significant hardware installations and human labor. This is our first stop. It's Lorensweg 5, located near the Teltow Canal in South Tempelhof. It is operated by 3U Telecom, which also operates data centers in Hanover, Marburg, and Frankfurt. 3U Telecom is a wholly owned subsidiary of 3U Holding AG, which was founded in 1997 and headquartered in Marburg. Built between 1916 and 1918 by architect Karl Stodig, this building was formerly the factory for C. Lorenz AG, founded by Karl Lorenz. C. Lorenz AG produced, among other things, radio, telegraph, and early telephone technology. It operated under this name from 1880 to 1958 and is likely the origin of the street name Lorensweg. During both World Wars, the company fulfilled military contracts. It expanded swiftly during World War II, with this building estimated to have served as a workplace for around 23,000 employees. Like many companies during this time, C. Lorenz AG employed forced labor, and records estimate perhaps as many as 3,100 forced laborers may have worked at this site. Forced laborers during the Nazi era included men, women, and children. The largest subpopulation was foreign civilians, in particular from Central and Eastern Europe, but it also included prisoners of war and concentration camp inmates. Lorensweg 5 is unfortunately not the only former forced labor site on today's tour. Many of today's data centers make use of former industrial facilities, which are able to bear heavy loads while being well integrated into the city's electrical grid and underground cable infrastructure. Because of the costs of retrofitting a building as a data center, many data centers save costs by building on the locations of former data centers. When today's industrial infrastructure is layered on top of the infrastructure of yesterday, it often shows the shape and echoes of history. In the words of Emma Ullman, we build our computers the way we build our cities, over time, without a plan, on top of ruins. What is internet infrastructure if not the embodied meeting place between computers and cities? What really comprises internet infrastructure? Where does it live, and what does it look like? Who runs it, and how? Cryptocurrency mining usually does not advertise its presence, setting up camp in locations where there is access to cheap electricity and cooling, converted basements, garages, unmarked buildings. It is perhaps the dark matter of internet infrastructure. It demonstrably exists, but is difficult to pinpoint precisely. Other aspects of internet infrastructure are surprisingly searchable. We've reached our second stop. This is Wiebestrasse, 4649, located in Charlottenburg, near the Ring. This data center is operated by Atlas Edge, formerly known as Colt. Atlas Edge operates more than 100 data centers spread through 9 countries in the EU and in the UK. This location pulls up 5.3 megawatts of power and has a footprint of 3.6 thousand square meters. Atlas Edge is a new company, launched September 2021 as a partnership between Liberty Global and Digital Bridge, which was formerly known as Colony Capital. Digital Bridge is based in the United States, and Liberty Global has headquarters in the UK, Holland, and the United States. Colt, the company that formerly operated Wiebestrasse 4649, is headquartered in London and owned by Fidelity Investments based in Boston. The lines of ownership of some of the larger internet companies are labyrinthine, and tracing them can feel like untangling cables. Who owns what percentage of this company? What was its previous name? Was it the subject of a merger or a corporate acquisition? You quickly enter a strange universe of previously unknown holdings companies and investment firms. The names of these companies are like the companies themselves: Colony Capital, Liberty Global, devoid of character but full of ideology. They are squarely in the terrain of what Keller Easterling calls extra statecraft, power both outside of and in addition to the expected boundaries of the nation-state, with entities playing a complex poker game in which both public and private players alternate between competitive and cooperative stances. The global system of the internet is integral to many people's lives and livelihoods, but the machinery that runs it is hidden in plain sight. Almost all of the information in this video comes from public websites, though digging through it can feel like its own form of mining. When assembled, it turns out the owners of internet infrastructure are as far-ranging as the communication the internet affords, which is not to say equally distributed. The internet is an endlessly sprawling, unfinished story about power. How do you begin to approach the internet as the subject of an artwork? It is too big, too far away, too wrapped in politics and capital, and like a puzzle piece in the dark, too unseeable. One way to approach something so big is sideways, through the small, the local, or the particular. This video began with a simple Google search of data centers in Berlin, and eventually landed on B6, the Berlin Internet Exchange and Peering Point, narrowing to focus on the 11 data centers listed there. But just as infrastructure takes the shape of history within a single city, the same is true globally. The internet on a local scale is a synecdoche of the global, the world in a grain of sand. This is the third stop on our tour, Lützestrasse 105-106, which is located near Gleisdreieck Park and Potsdamer Platz. Designed by WAF Architects Partnership in the 1970s, before its use as a data center, the building was used by the publishing industry. According to B6, there are 2 data centers spread across these buildings, one run by Carrier Colo and one run by DNSNet. Carrier Colo, founded in 2003, opened the first carrier-neutral data center in Berlin. Carrier-neutral, in the context of data centers, means operating independently from any particular network provider. The research for this video began with reaching out to every data center on the B6 list to ask for a meeting. Only one responded. It was Carrier Colo, and they facilitated a tour of their Lützestrasse location in July 2022. Data centers could not be more different in practice than the images on the internet appear. For one thing, images are silent, but real data centers are loud, from the running computers, ventilation, and cooling systems. Outside the door to a server room, you'll often find a disposable earplug dispenser. Inside the server room, the volume can reach up to 96 decibels, loud enough that being exposed for long periods would damage your hearing. Server rooms are also hot. Producing energy creates heat, but running computing infrastructure creates heat with no intermediaries. 100% of the energy consumed in a data center is ultimately converted into waste heat, and much of the task of a data center is dissipating it. The insides of server rooms are divided into channels so that cool air is funneled through hot machinery. Each room is like a small maze. The building feels like a body. with a cooling system like lungs that breathe in and exhale, spanning from the basement through many server rooms to the roof. The miles and miles of Ethernet cable and many redundant backup power systems are like a network of nerves or veins, a body that speaks across distances and connects to other bodies. Let's briefly talk about DNSNet, which also uses this Lutzerstrasse location. Founded in Berlin-Brandenburg in 1998, DNSNet is a non-carrier neutral data center that itself operates a customer-facing internet service provider, one of the largest German IP carriers. It is owned by 3i Infrastructure, which is headquartered in Jersey, in the Channel Islands, at an address that appears in the Panama Papers. One of DNSNet's goals is the expansion of underserved regions, and it has contracts to lay fiber to the home in a number of these municipalities. Where are these underserved regions? For DNSNet, it is locations in Brandenburg like Oberhavel and Havelland. But there's a bigger story here. The Berlin Internet Exchange Point lists 11 data centers, but only one of them is in former East Berlin. This pattern of distribution holds true for the country as a whole. Only 20 of Germany's 217 data centers are in the former DDR. It's difficult to find a single reason for this, especially as tracing the story around even one data center is surprisingly long and complex. It most likely involves economic as well as infrastructural factors. In Germany, there is disparity in access to fast internet between the East and West, even now. The 5 states of the former East rank lowest in the country in terms of homes with internet speeds over 1,000 megabytes per second. In rural areas, the difference is striking, with Sachsen-Anhalt only 26%, compared to Schleswig-Holstein at 79.7%. At least in this case, the disparity is likely to improve. Much of Germany's planned investments in new underground fiber are concentrated in the east, and, once finished, the balance between regional internet speeds should be more even. In the DDR era and following reunification, less cable was laid in the east, and the old boundaries are clearly visible on maps of today's cable network. Germany still relies on old copper cable for much of its last-mile internet delivery instead of newer fiber optics. Indeed, this is part of why its internet speeds overall are so much slower than comparable European countries. Much of this cable was laid in the early 1980s, and Germany may be a victim here of early internet expansion, as areas that waited and then laid fiber are holding up better today. However, this is controversial, as you can also find articles, even one from as far back as 1983, attesting that the decision to lay copper cable was risky, as it was clear that fiber would be the technology of the future. Some argue corruption was at play, with the post minister at the time involving his wife's company, Sonnenschein KG, in the cable-laying project, a company he had previously been managing director of himself. Let's now briefly look at Kitzingstrasse 15, the other data center operated by carrier Colo, the first company we talked about at our Lutzerstrasse stop. This is their newer and smaller location. It was put into production in 2010 and uses fiber optic connections to the Lutzerstrasse data center to provide geographical redundancy. Even before and beyond the internet, Berlin's telegram, telephone, and electrical infrastructure has an interesting and difficult history. When the wall was put up, all but 20 of the connecting telephone lines were cut, and the phone networks developed separately and at different rates. In 1990, only 10% of households in East Germany had a telephone, compared to 98% of those in West Germany. In the years immediately following reunification, it was not always possible to place a phone call from one side of the city to the other. The electrical grid developed separately as well, with West Berlin as an electricity island, disconnected from the grids of both West Germany and the DDR. It wasn't until 1988 that BWG, the municipal energy supply company, considered the electrical grid fully reunified. According to Deutsche Telekom, the full integration of the phone system was complete by 1997. Was there internet in the DDR? Not in the form of the World Wide Web, or anything resembling what we experience as the internet today, but in the late 1980s, a data line connected the Free University in West Berlin and the Humboldt University in East Berlin, the only civilian data line between East and West prior to reunification. Its capacity was only 9,600 kilobytes per second. The DDR also had its own top-level domain, .dd, like the .de used for Germany today. The .dd domain was used internally for some university mail systems, but never connected to the external global internet. When you load a website on your phone, you might request a URL like google.com. That request passes through several layers of infrastructure. First, from the phone or computer, most likely over Wi-Fi to a local router. From there, through the apartment building or house that is wired with cable or phone lines. The router then contacts a domain name server to look up what IP address it should use for google.com. It then forwards the request onward based on the IP address and its own routing table, where it goes to look up the next step. Most likely, in the course of answering your request, it passes through a variety of city-level underground cables to a large data center. From there, it may be passed on further to other cities on your continent, or perhaps to another via an undersea internet cable. Deep-sea cables are on the macro level, routers on the micro. At every scale of the network, we have something we could call infrastructure, but data centers are somehow in the middle, engaged in the internet as a whole, inaccessible under normal circumstances, but still tangible somehow. You can walk by a data center. There might be one on your street. This is our fourth stop, Gradestrasse 60 in Britz, operated by Lumen, formerly known as CenturyLink and Level 3. This location is also used by DNSNet. Lumen, the current operator of this data center, was formerly known as CenturyLink, which acquired Level 3, the original operator of this data center, in 2017. Lumen is headquartered in the USA, but it has customers in more than 60 countries and accounts for over 500,000 fiber route miles. In 2018, it was the second largest American provider of communications infrastructure to global enterprise. The original operator of this data center, Level 3, was accused in 2013 of helping the NSA wiretap D6, the Deutsche Commercial Internet Exchange in Frankfurt, though the company denied those allegations. Ironically, the current operator, Lumen, publishes a transparency report that details the number and category of legal requests for customer information from the United States government. They say the requested information may include account information such as name, address, email address, phone number, billing information, IP address, types of services the customer has subscribed to, call details, and payment methods. Some legal claims relate to content such as email messages, actual telephone conversations, and websites visited on the internet. In 2021, their report says, they received over 6,000 subpoenas and conducted 3 full-content wiretaps. Whether this sounds like a lot or a little is a matter of perspective, but perhaps the list of what is available to be subpoenaed lends a particular urgency to the question of how this infrastructure is administered and by whom. Next up is Lankwitzer Straße 4547, located in Mariendorf. The data center here is operated by NTT, which stands for Nippon Telegraph and Telephone Corporation. NTT operates 2 data centers in Berlin. We'll head to their second location after this one. This location is the newer of the 2 NTT data centers, and it is still under construction. Once complete, it will cover almost 20,000 square meters of space. NTT is headquartered in Tokyo. It is currently number 55 on the Fortune 500 and is the 3rd largest telecommunications company globally in terms of revenue. It was originally established as a state monopoly in August 1952, taking over networks operated by AT&T during the occupation of Japan. Though it was privatized in 1985, it is still 32% owned and highly regulated by the Japanese government. This is a similar timeline to the German liberalization of the telecom market, beginning in 1988, with the abolition of monopolies on the sale of end devices like telephones, ongoing until at least 1996, when Deutsche Telekom lost its right to network monopoly. Even beyond tangled corporate ownership paths, NTT and Deutsche Telekom provide examples of the complex constellations of public and private administration that arise in Internet infrastructure. Let's also briefly take a look at Nonnendammale 15, the other NTT data center in Berlin, located in Spandau. This was the first of NTT's Berlin data centers, and it spans across 2 buildings. It was previously operated by a company called eShelter, which continues to exist as a security consultancy. One of the services they offer is data center audits, which assess possible risks to the data center. They list a wide array of factors that must be considered in terms of a data center's physical location: possible flooding or extreme temperatures, seismic activity, soil contamination, or storms. They also consider the social and industrial fabric of the surrounding neighborhoods, including areas prone to traffic jams, demonstrations, other large gatherings, or criminal hotspots. Are there nearby factories involving heavy industry, processes that might be flammable, explosive, potentially toxic, sources of nuclear or electromagnetic radiation, nearby freight routes, or overhead air traffic? It is easy to see how the terraforming project of the Internet is interdependent with the terraforming project of global climate change. But the existential risk need not be strictly climate-related. It can also take the form of contemporary geopolitics. Data centers invest heavily in and prioritize having redundant power, often with on-site generators and enormous backup batteries, but they are still interdependent with the public grid and potentially vulnerable to large-scale energy shortages, like the one Germany feared in winter 2022. This is our second-to-last stop, Florastrasse 133-136 in Malsdorf. This is the only data center in former East Berlin that connects to the B6, the Berlin Internet Exchange Point. Today, this data center is operated by Pure, a trademark owned by Tele Columbus AG that is also used for consumer-facing internet services. According to company branding, Pure is about performance and simplicity, and the unusual Y character with a trema is meant to evoke a smile. Tele Columbus has been owned by an array of other companies since 1994, when it was first sold to Viba, a German state-owned energy company. One notable stop is its takeover by Unity Media in 2005, which was at the time a fully owned subsidiary of Liberty Global, a name we've already seen. Currently, the largest shareholder is United Internet, which is headquartered in Montabaur, Germany, and owns many well-known internet-related brands, including 1&1, Ionos, and GMX. Florastrasse 133-136 was formerly the location of Deutsche Bahn's in-house data centers. During its peak, Deutsche Bahn operated over 8,000 servers in this location. In search of greater flexibility and lower costs, the company began the move to the hosted cloud, in this case run by Amazon and Microsoft. The hosted cloud is, of course, made up of servers in data centers, the same kind of infrastructure we're considering in this video. For many software companies, hardware is completely abstracted as it is for the end user. Through a website or series of commands, remote computers can be turned on, updated, restarted. New interface, new owner, same data center. The question is not one of hardware, but of ownership and administrative structures. If you draw your attention to the lower right corner of the screen, you'll see the video is labeled Google Earth, arguably another public utility under private administration, this time on the software level. Creating this footage required agreeing to a set of terms and conditions, among them that the footage would not be used commercially and that the video would keep this attribution. Ironically, Google Earth may have infringed on a patent for TerraVision, a very early satellite visualization system created by Art & Com, a Berlin-based company, though Art & Com lost all official legal challenges brought against the internet giant. How do you feel standing over this monitor? Is it like playing the Earth as a video game? Google Earth gives us all the fantasy of what Donna Haraway has called the God trick, viewing everything from nowhere. We must be careful not to fall into it when talking about the internet. You have a body, it is breathing. You are watching this video on a device that was made in a physical place far away from the one you are watching it in. The power of looking at internet infrastructure is the power of seeing it's not so virtual at all. This is our final stop. There are 2 data centers in this location, Alboinstraße 36, in a former perfume factory run by Schwarzkopf, a German company that, among other things, invented the first liquid shampoo. Constructed between 1928 to 1930 and designed by Carl Mackensen, the building was state-of-the-art in the 1930s, with a telephone system, modern ventilation, and other features which may have contributed to its utility as a data center today. It is the second building on our trip that was used as a forced labor camp during the Second World War, although in this case, no details surfaced on the number of forced laborers in this location specifically. One of the data centers here is run by EU Networks, the other by Speedbone. EU Networks is headquartered in Hanover and partially owned by Stone Peak Infrastructure Partners, based in New York. EU Networks operates data centers and fiber networks in 17 cities across the UK and Europe, and specializes in building long-haul, high-capacity fiber. One of its recent projects is Scylla, a 211-kilometer double-armored subsea cable connecting the UK and the Netherlands. The Scylla cable is named after a nymph from Greek myth who was transformed into a tentacled sea creature with a cat's tail and 6 heads, each bearing 3 rows of shark's teeth. She is described as snatching up hapless sailors and eating them raw and screaming, a dark future for a young nymph and a surprisingly monstrous image for communication infrastructure. The other data center at Alboinstraße 36 is operated by Speedbone, a small company with only 22 staff. Their website gives the history of the building, which was the location of the first data center in Berlin, founded by O. Tello in 1997. As such, Alboinstraße 36 is the point of origin of Berlin's internet backbone and still has the greatest density of network providers in the region. Speedbone also sponsors Freifunk, with a server rack in this location. Freifunk is a non-commercial initiative to build a large-scale free Wi-Fi network owned by those who run it. It has over 41,000 nodes throughout Germany, many of which are located in Berlin. Their principles include supporting an open internet with unrestricted access to knowledge and information, operating on the free software principle of free as in freedom. They describe the ideal for wireless and wired networks as public spaces like streets, parks, forests, and the sea. Stories are not only written with words. They are written with infrastructure in fractal complexity. How do we deal with the baggage of the internet, the ugliness we can excavate, and the continued need to communicate and coordinate at scale? How do we reconcile the endless freedom supposedly offered by early dreams of cyberspace with the ruins it was built on? Ingrid Burrington has called the internet the world's largest terraforming project. Perhaps it's also the largest sculpture. But if the internet is a sculpture, who is the artist? If it is a terraforming project, who are the terraformers? The answer is no more obvious or easy than unraveling who runs the data centers of Berlin. It is something messy, the internet itself like Scylla of the Greek myth, the sea nymph who became a monster with her eponymous deep sea cable. Though maybe not so much the nymph that became a monster, but a monster and nymph still at the same time, each containing the possibility to become the other, cooperator and defector at once, always facing the choice anew.